Welcome to Defying Gravity, Renece Brewster.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Fantastic to have you here to talk about maybe a couple of your journeys, if I may. Obviously, you as a scale-up leader in this Defying Gravity series, but also you've recently, only weeks ago, launched a new initiative to support females in tech, and I would love to hear about that too. But first, tell us about Visual Domain, the company you built to exit.
Yeah, well, so Visual Domain was born in 2008 at the height of the GFC, where all good businesses start, right? But I guess keeping on that trend of, starting businesses for the right reasons, it was really like a lot of the reason why I started Visual Domain. It was actually driven by wanting to grow my family and not have to have my career at the cost of it. And I just felt like I couldn't have both unless I took the reins and actually built it and created it, which sounds absolutely absurd, but that was very much the reality at the time. I had just come out of I had my first child and didn't have a great experience sort of in the place that I was working and being able to sustain the growth that I had experienced prior to being pregnant. And I think that definitely left a bit of a mark on me. And then when I was ready for Bubs number two, and really show my age, but I've already said 2008, was working for this brilliant startup. They were creating a lot of mobile technologies pre-iPhone. So great ideas. 6 more months and the iPhone had been released would have been a very different story. But unfortunately, the GFC just did this poor company under, and I found myself out of work. And, it was a point in my life where my husband was in his second year of his carpentry apprenticeship, so not earning very much money back then, had a mortgage, had a toddler, needed to get an income. So I went on the job hunt. And there were a few questions, which again, I pray doesn't happen today, of just, are you going to have another child, would come up a lot of the time, a few times.
Completely legal questions, anyway.
um, and it caused almost like a visceral reaction. I'm just like, oh, here I go again. I'm going to have to go on pause if I want to build this career. They're judging me. It's like you had to hide this huge part of yourself, like in order to build something. That's very much how I felt. And, at the same time, in the farewell drinks that I'd had with my old employment, the mobile company that had gone under, I had met my then boss's mate who had worked in television, and we got talking at the bar, as as these things happen with a few drinks. It's definitely pre the pregnancy stage, and we were talking about this brand new site that was hitting the scene called YouTube, and how cool would it be if we did what he did in television but for online. And there was something about that idea that I just couldn't get out of my brain. So as I'm going for job interviews, I'm getting asked these questions. I've got this idea that I just cannot get rid of it. I just thought, bugger this, I'm going to make it. So took the retail job to keep money coming in on the weekends. I delivered pizzas for a long time. I'd buy things from op shops and resell them on eBay, whatever I had to do to keep the money coming in while we got the company off the ground. And, I was very fortunate. I did fall pregnant with Bubs number two not too long. And, I guess sort of got everything going because I wanted, that I was very driven. I was very focused, probably put myself in a position where failure was not an option, but it got the job done.
I love the phrase "pants on fire." They were.
Yeah. Deep end, swim.
It makes it required. Amazing. So Visual Domain helping creators with their YouTube kind of development.
Yeah, so I
Here you
think
are on YouTube again.
yeah, absolutely. And like early on, I think being in the position I was, I needed to prove very quickly if if Visual Domain could sustain my income and be a real legitimate business. And so I think that mindset just from the start, you know, a lot of creative service businesses are really born from, I think, you know, that, you know, creative human who loves their craft and creativity, which, you know, I so applaud and I can definitely resonate with. But I think just due to the nature of the way I started, it was a very commercial mindset of like, we need to be able to get scale. We needed to be able to be at a size where, you know, this could, you know, every week have an income coming in that we could build and we could grow. And that led us to, you know, look for those industries where we thought there'd be that recurring content requirement. And it led us to the real estate industry very, very early on, which is where we started. And if someone was selling their property, we'd do one of those little house tours that you see everywhere now. But back then, like this wasn't a thing. Like there was no spot on Domain or realestate.com or any of those sites for the video link to go. Like I'd talk agents through, you know, copying and pasting in the property description how to access the video, because that was the only way. And my weekends with the toddler involved going to the local park where I knew the agents hung out on a Sunday morning to go get in their ear about why they needed a video. And, you know, we were really focused on just getting to this point. I had in my head 5 videos a week, it's 1 a day, and we're off. And I think that really sort of set the tone of a very metric focused business from the start. Yeah.
That actually sounds like kind of best practice, and necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. Amazing. What was the hardest thing as you grew that business?
God, there was so many. I'd say though, if I had to pinpoint one, you know, at that time I was mid-20s. A lot of my friends were still at uni. I didn't have a professional network. I was a young mum. I sort of was doing everything a bit early for back then, and I just didn't have people around me who had been founders, who had gone through the same experience. And it's incredibly isolating, either being a mum or sometimes being a founder, both of them as much. And I think the hardest part was not having that professional network, to the point I actually went and sought it out at a point in time. So I realized I actually really needed people around me who could support me, who really understood what I was going through. And that was a game changer. Like that really, I think, you know, if I look at the years prior to the years after, it just gives you that, I think, a scale or pace that you can actually apply learnings to, and just that confidence in which you can kind of take each step forward when you've got that network to actually bounce ideas from.
Yeah. How did you do it, Renece?
I actually like
listening and needing it.
yeah. There was an ad, I can't even remember where I saw it. It might have been Facebook, God, it might have been MySpace, but it was an ad for a new network called Girls in Tech. And this is sort of leading into her tech circle notes that you mentioned at the start there, but it was calling for volunteers for girls in tech. And it was about professional women network wanting to support young women building in their tech careers. And I don't know what about it attracted me, but I was just saying yes to whatever I could see. That one kind of stood out. I found myself at a bar in the middle of the CBD, and there was some kind of heavy metal band playing upstairs from us. There was no lights downstairs. What the hell have I got myself into? But there I met some incredibly passionate women who wanted to, I think, create an environment or a community for professional women, to help them kind of really thrive and grow in their careers. And these were all women that I just immediately like wanted to be when I grew up, even though they were the same age as me, and resonated completely from the get-go. And you know, I think have now become really, really close friends that I've built and grown. So they were kind of my foundations. And then it was just about really proactively seeking them wherever I could, going to the networking events, putting myself out there to the programs. And just, you know, you find the people you've got the chemistry with almost instantly. And I think as founders, generally there's kind of that common bond as just our baseline starting point, which is really lovely when you see all founders together.
Mm.
So just seeking them out and building your little community of them is so important.
Yeah. So tell us about her tech circle. You've founded it a few weeks back.
Yeah.
Is this you full circle?
Yeah, it kind of is. So, Girls in Tech, that was back in 2016 when I went to that very weird volunteer call out, instantly I felt like I found my people, got myself onto the board, then found myself in an MD role. And look, unfortunately, earlier, or it was just in June of this year. No, it was July of this year. The founder of Girls in Tech unfortunately had to close her doors after 17 years. It was a US-led program, so we were just one of 70 chapters globally, and that US HQ had to close their doors. And I think we really see the impact that we have on the community. We've got 18,000 local Australian members, where we really feel like we're providing a support network for them that's so needed. Particularly, it's very interesting how it's changed post-COVID. And so I think for us, starting Her Tech Circle was really about how can we actually continue the work we were doing from Girls in Tech, but independently. And it certainly opens up the doors for us to just build and grow that impact that we so want to have on the local audience.
Yeah, fantastic. And for anyone listening who's got a lot to offer, I'm sure there are. What do you need to support that initiative? It sounds like a fantastic purpose.
So we really want to empower women at all stages of their tech career. So from like getting started all the way up to that kind of like C-suite stage. And we do that primarily through running events and through an online community. So support from an event perspective is always very welcome. If you have a space or a venue or a topic of expertise that will support women in empowering them to, basically the big driver is the fact that women make up 26% of the tech workforce here in Australia, which is not too dissimilar from most countries. But unfortunately, 50% of them leave between the years 3 and 4 of their career. Now, that says to me, we're not creating, career pathways or supportive workplaces that, enable and have, create a space where women actually want to build their career. So how can we tackle that? And, if they don't have a community at the workplace, they've got one with us. We can kind of try and support there as best we can. And then if we can run events that at different stages can help empower them to have a better conversation for themselves to build their own career, or to make their workplaces better, we feel like we're kind of, hopefully creating an impact to help improve the current situation as it is, because we want to see that diversity in our tech sector, essentially, of everyone. So anyone who feels they have a part to play, we collaborate with. There's so many great initiatives in Australia. It's just us all coming together because there's a very common cause behind there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the numbers are not, I saw recent ones that number of women invested in it actually gone down as a percentage for stuff.
It has. And that horrible stat they bring out every International Women's Day of like, at the current rate of change, how long until, women have got parity in the workplace? I think it was like 130 something a few years ago. And more recently, it was 141 years at the current rate of change for us to get equality in the workplace, which is just,
it's not okay.
Not okay.
All right, fantastic. That's a great call out. On Visual Domain, I'm really interested in, you made an exit to News Corp, or you still working with them, or
No, so finished up in March this year.
right? After
The acquisition in October 2021.
21, so a few years with them. So tell me, how did you decide it was the time? That's always a big consideration as a leader. Is it am I here for the next 5 years? We've all done it, kind of go, okay, that's
Yeah.
my time and it's not anymore, at various points. How did you make that decision? How did you?
Well, I think the initial decision about like going into the acquisition was really about enabling growth. We actually bootstrapped for the first 10 years, and then we took on a family office at that 10-year mark, because we were, at the end of the day, there was a huge tech piece to our business, but it was a service business and it had no recurring income. So whenever we did kind of want to make a bold move, it had to be so calculated, and we really were in a position where we felt like we could ramp up the growth, but we just needed that bit of backing to do it. So we went to a family office with a very clear objective of wanting to grow and scale the business to find and our path at that point in time, ironically, I just read that, gone blank to the book. It's the one by the Disney CEO. I think it's A Ride of a Lifetime. Anyway, he talks about the strategy of acquiring for growth, and I really thought that that would be our pathway. So we went out to market, did a bit of a roadshow, wrote down all the kind of like hit list of potential kind of production partners that I thought we could build up Visual Domain. And I quickly realized that we were quite unique. And I hadn't actually fully realized that until going through that process of meeting all the other production companies and just realizing very quickly there wasn't a value alignment, and it was just never going to work, and it wouldn't have been the right thing for either business. And so I thought, okay, if we can't sort of feed the smaller ones in, maybe we need to look for a bigger one to actually come into us as our strategy to, I guess, just sort of, we started every month on zero. Sales were always this sort of, sore point where, unless we were growing the sales team and they were all being successful, it just felt like such a slog, and we just wanted to fast track it. So how could we get a big partner that was strategic, that could actually start to build money in? And we started conversations along that vein, and actually were successful in getting 2 term sheet from not News Corp, from some other parties. And then News Corp, who was our biggest client at the time, and we had tried to get in front of them, but without much luck, ironically. But biggest client at the time, still, however, less than 5% of our revenue, so not make or break if we lost them. But they actually called one day and said, look, I'm sorry, we're going to have to bring our services in-house. We're spending too much money with you. And this is totally testament to the team, but they were gutted. Like, they had worked so hard to build this relationship, to build this account. They loved the content. And it was, one of these overnight success stories of me saying, well, let's find this silly executive and tell them why they're wrong. And, we marched in, and I was not even thinking anything more than, well, hopefully we can convince them to give us whatever they can't produce in-house, we'll get the scraps, so to speak. And that very quickly led to, well, why don't we look at something bigger? And we joined the News Corp family. So that felt like it changed the game very quickly, that this was the right partner, this was the path to go down.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Amazing,
the rest
amazing.
kind of grew from there very quickly, but it was really targeted around growth. I don't think I've answered your question, sorry.
No, you did. That's super interesting. It's lovely strategy. I love it. Either we roll up or we get rolled.
Yeah.
It's that next step of scale, and how do you get to it? It's
Mm.
something that's a lot of activity at the moment, isn't there, in these, pretty tough digital environment, and a lot of consolidation for scale happening. Super interesting. In terms of just looking back on that journey, obviously you've got a little bit of perspective a few months back now that you've actually exited. What were your hardest personal moments? I mean, it sounds like it was started out of some pretty challenging personal
Yeah, I
situation,
think.
but as you grew to like 100 staff, a great exit. You
Hmm.
It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen easily. Tell me about your personal moments where you kind of.
Or maybe more reflecting on my personal moments around even the acquisition itself. Because I think, there was, I knew for the business it was going to be such a strategic and great thing for us to, you know, in the way I saw it, it was almost like this tap we could then run of work that would enable growth. And for me, growth always meant that I could create new opportunities for the team. And that's what really was driving me. Like, I loved that we were, for so many of the creatives that work for us, their first job in the industry, you know, this is their DNA. They did this on the weekend after hours, you know, they're creatives through and through. And so the fact that we could actually pay them for the craft they were so passionate about, and if I could, as much as humanly possible, create a career for them where they were constantly growing, that was what really lit, you know, the fire in my belly at that particular point in time. And so, you know, coming into News Corp, I knew that that would be probably a bit of a sore point for the team. Like, you know, News Corp were the first to say this too, but, you know, the creators weren't really like passionate about News Corp and aligning to their values of what they wanted to be working on, even though the content was so great for so many of them. Just this thought,
Yes.
it didn't sit right. And I think, you know, personally, I knew that that would be the case. And so I worked very hard to try and assure them that, you know, nothing would change and it would be okay. And I even went very aggressive to a degree in the negotiations with News Corp in ensuring that I could protect our culture, that we retained our own office space, that we, you know, had separate payroll. For as much as humanly possible, I didn't want life to change for the team. And, you know, benefit of hindsight, when you have someone actually make a major acquisition, maybe even a minor one, I just haven't had a minor one, it does change the culture. Like, it does. And it's not worse, it's not better, it's not anything. It just changes the culture. And I think had I maybe leaned into that more, I could have potentially navigated certain parts of it better. And when you ask me how I was, you know, I came out of, you know, getting through the family office investment, and then we had COVID. Now, business was not designed for COVID. I mean, we had the majority of our team were Melbourne based. So even just trying to figure out, you know, a business where you go out and film people face to face, and you know, work with file sizes that are 200, 300 gig, which we normally have the benefit of, you know, a server in the office to help facilitate. It was incredibly challenging, as it was for almost everyone, to navigate that period. And then the diligence phase with News Corp was pretty much what you would expect the diligence phase with News Corp to be. There was
Yes.
me, someone from the family office, and my CFO, and I think there was 86 on their team. So, you know, it was an intense process. And, you know, by the end of it, certainly burnout, you know, at that stage had its place to play. And I reflect on the acquisition process, and I almost compare it to like when I was pregnant. Like, you're pregnant for 40 weeks and you count the 40 weeks until this Labor Day, and then you sort of just don't think much past that when you're pregnant. And I almost relate to that whole diligence stage as almost like you're just not Labor Day, but that day you sign the final contracts is the kind of equivalent. And you work so hard just to get to this point, and then you get there and you realize, oh, shit, I've got to bring the baby home. Like, I've got to bring it back to the family. And
Yeah.
that's the big work. That's
Yeah.
when you actually need to dig so much deeper and really navigate the team through this change that you've become accustomed to. You've gone through the cycles of what does this mean, and you've become familiar with it. You've, you know, now I had to navigate 120 people who just weren't, their natural kind of value alignment probably wasn't there through this shift. At the same time, you know, while their worlds, I worked very hard to make sure it didn't change, mine completely was
Yeah.
upside down.
You have a new master, and yeah.
Yeah, new structure, just
Yeah.
everything.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Fascinating. Fascinating. What amazing lessons. Yeah, I always think about that with weddings too. It's like, God, the wedding doesn't matter. It's the marriage that matters. We need to focus there. It's these milestones, aren't they, that
Just can't see
can take
past them
over.
when you're in the thick
Yeah.
of it. And
Yeah.
To be fair,
Yeah, well,
there's
I mean,
so many moving parts. You probably
yeah.
don't have the space to think that
No,
far.
like cognitive load of a transaction when it can go flat at any moment. So it becomes
Exactly.
such a key milestone. It's
Yeah.
completely understandable, but what an interesting reflection. As you transitioned and as you grew, even before the News Corp
Yeah.
acquisition, um, tell me, were there things that you look back on and go, that unlocked the next stage of growth? Like obviously News Corp is one of those and
Mm.
a really interesting strategic move. But prior to that, are there any other reflections through your scale-up journey when you were sole charge
Yeah.
that you look back and lesson learned that unlocked? Obviously mentors and finding your people to support you was a big one, which a lot of founders mention. But anything else inside your team, in yourself?
Definitely. And like it was something I resisted for so long, but it was actually articulating our vision and values, which I think for most people are standard practice, but it took me a while. But I think as a founder, when you start, you're so driven to build something, and it's almost like people gravitate towards that energy to a degree when you get those first few team members. Like, it's just we're making something special here, and it's that magnetic energy that's in the universe that I think for those first few years can almost let you get away with, maybe not articulating everything down and having everything, because you're kind of still creating it and you're building it together. And it's such a magic little time, but then it gets to this point where it's sort of like, well, why am I here and what am I part of, and who do we want alongside us on that journey? And as simple as it sounds, it took us a long time to just actually articulate our vision is to work with brands as their partner in production. It's so simple, but it actually made every decision moving forward so much easier. It just removed all the noise around it. But equally, when we were talking to new team members, like, this is what we're building. Do you want to build it with us? And if they didn't, that's totally fine. But this is what we want to do. And so that, I think, really helped us, I think, get clarity on where we were going and what we were building. And then the values piece to us was really important about how we wanted to do it. And I think you always come across those situations where, you've got either people in the team or clients or, people that you're working with closely that don't share the same values. And there is always that friction. And sometimes you can work through it and it's all fine. But I think there's some core ones when you're wanting to work in a business that's, I think particularly service and creativity. And we really utilized what we were selling at the end of the day was what the team were creating. So making sure that was there was then, I think, the big part, and that was done through work and workshops with the team. But I think what was really special was how then we had 4 values and they continue to evolve with the team, and it was led by the team to define who we are. Like a great example, I think it was uh, something around support. I can't remember what the original value was, but one of the girls said it should be heart-led hustle. And I loved that. And I know hustle's got a really bad name, but for me, it just means, you've got that grit and you're constantly
Yeah.
moving. Like, I have such a positive
Yeah, me too.
reaction
I
to
like
making the word
hustle.
hustle. I know others don't, so I'll just prefix it with that. We'll go this way when we need to, and oh crap, we've got to do this and we'll go that way. And it's just that pace at which you can go about things. But her heart-led piece I just thought was so apt, because it was like, but we always care first. Like, we always care about the people first, and we care about our clients, and we care about the way we do it. And I'm just like, I love that. So she sort of took that baseline value and just evolved it. And I think it really got embodied in the team. And they weren't just those pretty posters at the front of the door. They were really how we lived and breathed. And it helped us make decisions. It helped us define the strategy for the following years and beyond once we articulated it. So go through the process. It's well worth it, because it
Yeah.
does make everything after it so much easier. And it's like, I call it almost like the wedding dress moment. It's sort of like, when you've got them, like it just feels like, this is it. This is us.
Yeah.
This is where we're going.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm.
everyone nods, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you just know
yeah.
it. You can't just put a word out there that doesn't resonate.
No. It's such a fundamental of scaling, isn't it? Because it's that moment where suddenly you're not managing everyone and you need those managers to do it in the right way. And
Yeah.
it doesn't happen without it. Yeah, amazing. Look, this has been gorgeous. We've meandered everywhere. It's me, not you. It's such an interesting story, Renece. I always finish with one question. What is your number one piece of advice for a scale-up CEO?
I have so many. I have to pick
Yeah.
one.
Well, a lot of people have gone to three, don't worry.
I think just trust your instincts. You always know when something's not right. Like, have faith in them. They're what's gotten you this far. I think
Mm,
that's a big one.
that's huge.
Side note, and not one that you asked for, but I find I'm sharing it. Like, I'm working with a lot of startups, and they're at a critical point at the moment. Like we were chatting before we started recording about how tough the environment is, and it is at the moment. And something someone said to me that I've found myself saying on repeat recently is just like, no one successful has not been in this position. Like, the pathway to success and growth, you make every mistake known. Like, there is no perfect linear upward scale. Like, there's
Yes.
plenty of like, oh my goodness, I'm about to lose it all. God knows we were there a few times. Like, this is the pathway to success, and others have been in this. It just, for me, when I heard it, I felt like, okay, this is just the path, and it gave me this almost like calm of then like trying to tackle the issues. It wasn't just me being a failure. This is the pathway. And so, take hopefully some of that spirit and solidarity and, find your pathway up.
That's a great line. That's a very great line for our times. Thank you so much, Eunice.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks for having me.